the biggest game to me is going to be Penn State traveling out to Iowa City to take on Iowa Hawkeyes. You have 4 versus 3. And Iowa's a little bit like Georgia in the fact that they play great defense. They run the football really well. You know, Petrus, their quarterback's been good. He was much better against Maryland, but they thrive on the fact that they can turn the football over, they can stop the run, and they can get after you defensively. That sets up their offense to be in advantageous situations. Conversely, you start talking about Penn State, and what they're able to do. And when Sean Clifford's been on, they've been really good, and he's played really well this year. Hasn't really turned the football over. He's made the big plays down to Jahad Dotson. They've been able to throw it intermittently fairly well. I think their defense is really talented and very, very good, but I just don't necessarily, I don't trust their running game fully the same way that I don't trust Iowa's passing game. And so I think Penn State could have a full day's work on their hands if they can't make big plays in the running game or in the passing game. That is what's kind of allowed them to have success. And with Dotson being a guy who's probably a first round talent at wide receiver, and Sean Clifford doesn't turn the ball over, that's what's allowed them to have success. Iowa's going to challenge them up front. They're going to try to eliminate that run game, and I think that they will for the most part. All of this is going to fall back onto Sean Clifford. It'll be a raucous environment. It'll be a tough place to play. Kinnick Stadium, very, very difficult. Only stadium I've never won in the Big Ten. Very, very tough place to play. And this Iowa team is believing. And a lot of times in sports, belief is half the battle. I'm inclined to take Iowa in this game and think that they're able to win this thing. I think Penn State's a more talented team. And I believe that's not just me saying this is recruiting over the last, 3 to 5 years. If you look at the rankings, you'll see that Iowa has not performed at the same level, but they do develop their players really well. They have a firm identity, and you know what they're going to bring to the table. With that being said, this Penn State team, they found a way to pull it out against Auburn. They found a way to pull one out at Camp Randall against Wisconsin, who, despite Wisconsin's struggles, their defense was still really good. A defense that's kind of the same caliber as Iowa's, a little bit different in how they play the game, but very, very similar in their ability to execute and what they're going to be able to do. So Penn State having that big road win for me, I think that's going to push me over the top. And I'm going to probably lean on the fact that I think Sean Clifford's been good and he's matured enough and he's playing at a high enough level now that I think Penn State ultimately gets this win. I think it is a close game. I don't see a blowout either side unless somehow Iowa, they've got that horseshoe stuck up their rear again and they can just have a turnover machine to start the game, which I don't see happening. But outside of that, I think Penn State pulls it out in a close one, very, very close, nail biter, in my opinion. But that's great for college football. It's going to be highly entertaining. First top 5 matchup in the Big Ten that didn't include Ohio State or Michigan in over 50, 60 years. I mean, I think the last one was in the 50s. So you're pushing almost 70 years with this. So it's great to see some parity at the top of the Big Ten. That's fantastic. The OU Texas Red River Shootout, this weekend. You got Spencer Rattler one side, you got Bijan Robinson. I mean, can they run the ball? Can Texas run the ball enough against an improved Oklahoma defense to be able to keep Spencer Rattler off the field? And it looked last week against Kansas State that OU's finally got this offense rolling a little bit, finally scoring 30 points. Defense obviously wasn't quite as good as they've been, but it looks like the offense is in a better place. But this could be the first loss for Oklahoma. They've struggled a little bit this year, and they haven't looked like their normal dominant selves. If they lose, I think that whole Big 12 could potentially be up in the air with everything moving forward. And I think it could also jeopardize Oklahoma's spot in the college football playoff because you have Cincinnati now with their victory against Notre Dame lurking, waiting for one of these Power 5 conferences to struggle. And we saw it last week with Oregon Stanford. OU, if you want to make the college football playoff, don't become this week's victim in the Red River Shootout. Big rivalry game. Fired up about it, and that should be another one that should be a high quality atmosphere and should be rocking down there in Texas. And then the last game to kind of look at a little bit is Georgia Auburn. Auburn was supposed to be great this season, pretty good this season. They went up. Bo Nix hasn't played well. They went up to Penn State. They lost that game. Some calls, iffy calls that maybe kept it a little closer than what it should have been or potentially could have been. The best teams in this rivalry matchup don't always win. And Auburn, I feel like has the horses up front to potentially slow that running game of Georgia. I don't know if they can score enough points offensively. They're a little bit offensively stunted. Bo Nix, but here's the thing about him. When he plays well, he can catch fire, and he's a streaky player. They've got the game. I believe it's at Auburn. They'll have Georgia coming into town. This will be kind of a make or break, for them. If they win this game, I think Auburn have tons of momentum, pushing into the rest of the SEC, their schedule, and potentially maybe being able to challenge Bama in the West. I don't think that happens, but I think this is maybe the truest test that we'll get to see Georgia maybe have to use that passing game. But for that to happen, I think Auburn can slow the running attack enough, but they have to score points. And I don't know. I can't get behind it to see if Bo Nix will be able to lead that offense enough to be able to possess the ball, drive it down the field, and to score some points. So I don't necessarily see that happening, but I do want to see if Georgia can get challenged a little bit. And if JT Daniels, who I think is going to be the starter this week, if he can find a way to get that running game going, or that passing attack going rather, if the running game doesn't necessarily produce at a super high level and they have to find a way to get some points in there. I'd love to see it be a shootout between Nix and JT Daniels. I don't foresee that happening, but I do think this is the best chance to challenge that Georgia running attack. So that'll be interesting to watch.